Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The year was 1997. A good year for many of us. The economy was doing well. Society was changing. There was a surging youth movement for those called millennials who were demanding that society give them what they were due. Some of us were in the later stages of our lives, some looking to retirement and others dreading retirement. It was a time that we called the good life, at least for those who had the resources. But in 1997, even though the economy was doing well, there were those who were not doing well. Those who had great holes in their lives. It was true for a woman named Shawn Gant, a single mother with a young son struggling to make ends meet, little education, could not compete for good jobs, and then she discovered she was pregnant. Months later, a second son was born. She tried her best, but she simply could not make it with two small children. And so she had to make a decision that no mother would ever want to make, and that was to give up her newborn, which is what she did. When asked about it, she said, "At the time, I felt like I could not give him what he needed. And so he was adopted." His name was Kieran Graham, adopted by the Graham family, raised by them, but always curious about who he was. Who was his mother? Indeed, who was his father? And so in his teens, he was driven to search for who he was. He went through the DNA testing. And miracle of miracles, he got a match. Kieran discovered that he had a brother. Not only did he have a brother, he had a brother that lived 15 minutes away and was a freshman at Kennesaw State College. And so they were united. They are learning who they are and whose they are. In a very real way, we are all related to each other in a shared humanity. And we come here this morning to proclaim that. That in a very real sense, we are united, knowing who we are as individuals, but proclaiming in this context whose we are. Whose we are through our baptism. And so it is that we go back to the very beginnings of who we are. That first reading of ours from the opening chapter of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. In the beginning, God created. Psalm 100 says it this way, "Know that the Lord is God. It is He that made us, and we are His. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture." We know who we are as individuals. I suspect that all of us know something about our families. That at such a point in time, Sam and Sarah got married and produced you, the offspring. That you and I are related. And we spend our lives finding out who we are. I discover things about myself and recalling my parents know what they have handed on to me. That I inherited my father's short temper. That my mother handed on to me a love for education, particularly reading. It's an insight into who I am and whose I am. Because the other thing that they handed on to me was my identity as a child of God. And at the age of 6 months, I was brought to the church, and there I was baptized, claimed as God's very own child. That idea of who we are and whose we are, that we are one of God's creatures, and that we belong to God in a real way, just as we belong to our own families. However, that affirmation of who we belong to goes against about everything we are taught about ourselves in the modern world. Or we get affirmations about be who you are. That is solely up to me. I am told by my society that I can be anything I want to be. Bull. Society says, be all that you can be. It's our battle cry. Pete Rock, the singer, proclaims the world is yours, but the world is mine, mine, mine. Is it really? I'm at that stage of life where I believe that a great deal of modern religion focuses on us. What is it that makes us happy? Shop around. Look at what's happening in church construction. Not far from here, there is $1 million building that just opened a few months ago. It has a coffee bar. It has a snack bar. It has a gym. It has playground facilities. It has an entertainment director. Is that really what we are about? The church and its scriptures bids us to look at things differently. That it's not just who we are, but whose we are. And so on this Sunday, this first Sunday after the Epiphany, Jesus' baptism, in which he's declared as the Son of God, who comes up out of those waters begin a ministry. We begin at the beginning. So our first lesson this morning is the opening words of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. He created you and created me. And yes, we have a special, unique identity for each of us. But we're also related to one another in our humanity. Genesis proclaims that God didn't create and then retire. That it is of God's nature to always be creating. That creation is always a work in progress, just as we are a work in progress. If we believe that God is still a God and creation is a work in progress, then we ought to be asking those deep religious questions. Where is God at work now? Where is God's created life being shown forth? Who are the ones that God is creating in this stage, in this life? What is God up to in the world? And the next question ought to be, and where do I fit into that? Are we asking those kinds of questions? After the crucifixion, the disciples huddled behind closed doors, terrified, until the angel appeared and said, "He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will meet him." My version of that is, get up off your behinds and get going. He is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him. See, there's no place on this journey we call life that he has not been and that he does not meet us somewhere on that journey. Bill Willimon is a Methodist, now a retired Methodist bishop. He and I were acquaintances when he was the chaplain at Duke University, and I was the chaplain at West Georgia. He tells of a graduation at Duke, a medical school graduation. A friend of his was giving the graduation talk. And to that audience of new doctors, this is what the speaker had to say. "'Tis a brave world, my young doctor. Do not be afraid of it. Do not calculate your chances so closely that you miss your chance. Do not pretend to know what you do not know. Work and laugh and give thanks, for these three are one. You did not make the world. You cannot remake it. You cannot even spoil it. You may, however, know the wonder of improving some small corner of it. But do not forget that before you arrived, the world was pronounced good. Go now and enter into its joy." As we begin this new year, this new church year, we remember not only who we are, but whose we are. And we are called to live into the joy of that knowledge. And so this morning we will renew our baptismal vows, which proclaim the uniqueness of each of us and our common humanity as children of God. Amen.